Hi, everyone. So today we are going to look at what goes in an introduction and related works section. And then we're also going to learn how to organize sentences to write these sections. So what goes in an introduction section? The first thing that you would want to talk about is the task in question. Like, are you solving an image classification problem? Is it a speech recognition problem? Like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Like, you just have to lay it out there so that the readers know in the first page when they go over your paper that, okay, the authors are trying to solve this problem. And then you would also want to discuss, like, what is the best that can be done on this task currently? And also, what can it not do? Like, what are the gaps in the methods and what are the failure cases? And then you would also talk about your idea that you're proposing in the paper and how it fixes different problems. And finally, you would conclude the introduction section by showing some proof that it actually works. So if we zoom in a little, the first paragraph would look something like this. Like, what is the task and why is it important? So in this example, you can see that it's written the basic goal of semantic segmentation or simply segmentation is to classify each pixel in an image onto one of the predefined semantic categories or classes. So by reading this line, we know that, okay, the authors are trying to solve a semantic segmentation problem. And then they follow this up by discussing what are the real world applications for semantic segmentation. So it's basically saying us that why is it important? What are the real world applications of this task? And in the next paragraph, we could mention how others solve it. So basically here you talk about the recent works or progress that has been done for this specific task. And then you also discuss how hard is it? Like, for example, in dense prediction tasks, sometimes the objects are all cluttered together. So there is a problem of occlusion, like one object is in front or in back of the other, then you cannot see one clearly. So this makes recognition difficult. You could say stuff like this here to motivate that, okay, this problem is hard and it has these set of challenges. And then another paragraph would discuss where the methods fail. And you would also say where the methods are good at, as well as like what are the flaws in these methods. And then you would talk about, since these methods fail in these cases, why do we care about this? What would happen if we solve this problem? This is also basically motivating your entire work, which would be around this, that you're trying to address these gaps in these problems. And finally, you would have a paragraph which would talk about the solution that you are trying to propose. Like, you would give the main intuition of how your method works and also mention about some proof that it actually works. So by proof here, I mean that you could say that, okay, this method outperformed these methods on these data sets and stuff like that. And the last thing you would have is a contribution section, which would basically have 3 or 4 bullet points, which would highlight what you actually did in this like entire work or paper. So here's a template for the introduction section, which basically would say, what is the task? Why is it important? How is it hard? How others solve it? Where does it fail? Why do we need to solve these failure cases? And what is the solution? And at the end, we would list the contributions, which would highlight the things that we have done in this work or paper. So for related works, we ideally have the overall category or the approaches of the different types of methods, which are divided in separate subsections. So for each subsection, you would discuss the success of these methods and also the evolution of these methods to more recent methods, while also highlighting the gaps. And then you would also want to explain how these works are different from your work, because then when a reader goes through your related works, they would know that, okay, this method is different from the author's work, specifically in this context. And optionally, you could also name the subsections of your related work section, which could reflect parts from your paper title itself. We'll see an example of this in the following slides. So one subsection of a related work could be like this, where you discuss the success and evolution of methods. And then you discuss the gaps in these methods, where you go a bit deeper on how these methods work and like where it failed exactly. And then you would end by how these methods are different from your work, and then how it addresses these gaps. Another example could be something like where you discuss the overview of the class of methods, and then you discuss the gaps in those methods, followed by how is it, again, different from your work, and how does it address these gaps that you have motivated before. So here's an example of naming related work section, which could reflect parts from your paper title. So here's a title of a paper, which is Fill in Fabrics, Body Aware Self-Supervised in Painting for Image-Based Virtual Try-On. So the first section in the subsection in the related works could be image-based virtual try-on, which basically points to virtual try-on in your paper title. And the other subsection is called masked data modeling here, which refers to in-painting in the paper title. So since in-painting uses masking, so it makes sense to use this masked data modeling term here, which would summarize the category of methods related to masked data modeling. Here's a template for related works. So in the first step, you basically discuss the category of the approach types. And then for each subsection of an approach type, you mention how good they are and how they work, and also what is the evolution to the state-of-the-art methods, and what are the gaps in these methods, and how is it different from your method. And in cases where you have like 3 or 4 subsections in your related work section, it is always a good practice to basically have a final paragraph where you summarize how your work differs and addresses gaps compared to prior work. So by reading that, when a reader goes through many subsections, they could understand, okay, these are the main points that sets the authors apart from the previous works. So that's it for this lecture. And on the next one, we will see how to write the method section, which is basically the most important part of your paper.